Hi, hello everyone. I'm Sergey. I'm the founder and CEO of BranchTrack, and thank you for joining this webinar. Before we begin, a couple of household items. For the duration of this meeting, this webinar, everyone is on mute, but there is a chat button that you can use to ask questions. Typically, these sessions are rather interactive and people chat and comment and share opinions and experiences, and I hope this will be like this today too. By the way, please find that button and let me know that you can actually hear and see me well. That would be very weird if you couldn't. Also this, thanks, Kathleen. Also, this session is being recorded. We will share the recording later with you, and feel free to pass it on to your colleagues, subject matter experts, anyone else who might be interested. So without further ado, let me just share my screen and we'll begin. And I'm also sharing my full desktop, so hopefully nothing weird sticks out. Right. So today I wanted to talk about quiz questions, how to write good questions that actually help your learners learn and help you as an instructional designer or a trainer achieve your learning goals. And also what bad questions look like, why they're bad, and I created a list of mistakes that I have seen over my 15 years in instructional design. And I've written a ton of bad questions myself because I was maybe stressed for time, maybe I didn't know any better, maybe I didn't care too much about that part of a training, which hopefully you will care a little bit more about after this session. And I think I've written a couple of good questions as well. So, and I've definitely seen my share of terrible questions, both as a learner and someone who was involved in projects where I didn't have any control over the content. So, yeah, and there's a Riddler on my cover page. This session is not about BranchTrack. You don't need to own, have, or even have heard about BranchTrack. Although if you have heard about BranchTrack, I will be very pleased. If you haven't, I'll be even more pleased if you go to BranchTrack.com and check it out. It's a tool that allows you to create scenario-based questions, scenario-based trainings in your browser. You can easily design, kind of drag and drop different paths of what your learner should go through. It's collaborative, it's online, it's very easy to deliver on mobile and also embed into Storyline, for example, or into Lectora. It has leaderboards, scores, points, all sorts of gamification features. Works great for webinars actually, and it's very much data driven, so it collects a ton more data, more useful data than a typical SCORM thing, although it does publish to SCORM as well. I will not be talking about this anymore, and I will actually be talking about scenarios and BranchTrack as well in a week from now. So next Thursday, the invite for that webinar will go out in about 30 minutes. All right, so let's talk about questions. And I wanted to actually talk about learning in general, first of all. So a typical situation for me, at least, and let me know if you agree, is that a subject matter expert brings you a ton of material and says that learners must know this. And when you ask them, like, what's relevant, what's necessary, what's more important, less important, typically everything is important. They need to know everything. You cannot cut anything and so on. So we take this heap of knowledge, facts, information, and documents, policies, whatnot, and we try to make sense of this, right? So we try to put it on a certain timeline or along a certain structure. I've talked about this last Thursday, actually. And we try to highlight things that actually are helpful and maybe kind of move things that are not necessary into the background. And when we create sort of an interactive course, we want to, well, of course, we start with putting a quiz, a knowledge check at the end of the course. We'll hide some information behind, like learn more or read more buttons. We might put some sort of an interaction front and center, and typically this is our job. And in my experience, we're mostly concerned with things like really sorting out the information, or designing interactions, or sometimes in graphic design, more than we are concerned with authoring a quiz. And therefore, quizzes aren't really done well. They're almost an afterthought, and the amount of time that is allocated out of, let's say, 2 hours, 200 hours of project building into quiz building is, I don't know, 8 at best. So hopefully we'll see less of that. Right. So I wanted to ask you, like, what are we testing? So there's Bloom's taxonomy of knowledge, which starts with knowledge, with facts, with things that you can remember at the bottom, and then it elevates into understanding, into being able to apply the things that we understood from learning, like solve a problem, solve a case, and then it elevates into analysis, evaluation, and creation of new stuff. Like based on what we've learned, we can actually dissect a problem into pieces. We can propose a solution. We can tell if that solution is better or worse than alternatives, or we can create new knowledge based on what we've learned. My question to you: most quizzes that you see, the questions, do they test? Which level do they test? So from bottom to top, level 1, think of an elevator. Ground level, level 1, level 2. What do you think? Let me know in the chat. It'll be fun. And by the way, we're 9 already. That's actually cool. So yeah, what do you think? And trust me, this webinar I will force you to interact with me, because there will be quiz questions that you will have to provide answers. So I have like 2 minutes to actually train and persuade you on using the chat option. So in the quiz questions that you typically see, what level of knowledge is being tested? Is this facts, the ability to remember facts, or is it more of an understanding or application? And thank you for participating. I really appreciate that. It's really hard when people don't. Yes, so we have remembering, knowledge, remembering, and opinion from Julia that most quiz questions are in the bottom 2 layers. And I totally agree. And I think that most of them are in the bottommost part. We test facts. And I've actually seen people who go through an e-learning course with a phone in their hands, and they will take pictures, because they can't make screenshots, and it's not easy to access them on computers. They will take pictures of the screen, like literal screenshots, and then when they get to the quiz, they can just quickly reference through those pictures and ace the quiz, because everything that's being asked is just facts from what you've learned in the past 30 minutes or so. So an amazing way of dealing with complexity in learning that I found is action mapping. I've talked a bit about this last Thursday. I promise I will do like a full half-hour webinar on action mapping. It's a methodology by Kathy Moore, which allows you to split everything that you do within the course into levels, which are even easier than the previous pyramids that we've seen. So we can talk about goals, what learners need to achieve, or maybe the behaviors that we want to change, the problems to be solved, and then, or to give you an example, if this is a course on selling gadgets, then the goal is to sell more gadgets. The goal of the course is to sell more gadgets. If the course is on compliance, the goal is to be more compliant, make less mistakes, get less fines from overseeing authorities. And then to achieve that goal, the action, is what they need to do. Like to sell more gadgets, you need to be able to present the best features of a gadget. And you need to be able to demonstrate the gadget in action to the customer. And you need to be able to tell 5 different types of customers, because they will want 5 different categories of gadgets. So what learners must do. So these are actions. And then only then there's information in the course, right? So it's at the bottom. It's the information that helps learners to demo the gadgets. It could be a video of someone else demonstrating it, or it's a customer simulation where you need to tell the types of customers, and then obviously you need information on what types are there. Or if we talk about objection handling, what types of objections there are. You need to know that information in order to do the action of dealing with an objection, which leads us to the goal of actually being able to sell more. So that's the idea. And I like to use this when I look at my questions. Am I asking my learner to remember a piece of information, or am I asking them to do something kind of virtually in their head? But am I putting them into a situation? Am I asking them to apply that knowledge? And I think if you take one thing away from today, it's that you always want to elevate above information and knowledge check, although that thing is called knowledge check. So test for actions, not for information. Right, now I wanted to take a look at the anatomy of a quiz question. It consists of 2 parts. Rather obviously, it has the question part and the answer part, and both are important. In a question, you need to sort of provide a background information. I see a lot of quiz questions which they ask you something, but you don't even understand what it relates to. You've just been through 2 hours of reading, and it's very hard. So questions, when you write a question, you look at a certain page and you come up with a question about something on that page. Learner has been through 200 pages, and they will not necessarily be able to make this connection back to that piece of information. So a good question will have a bit of background information. Then the core of actually the problem that we're trying to solve defined rather clearly. And I see a lot of questions which try to test you, kind of trick you into missing something or misinterpreting something, and people who create those questions think they're super clever. What I like to do is I like to highlight things that you can actually miss, right? So if we talk about some sort of units of measurement, or like measuring time in days versus hours versus month, then and if I have something, where I have the data measured in days, and I ask like how many months will it take you to do this and that, I will try to highlight that, please don't confuse months and days if I can't rephrase this question entirely to avoid that. So being clear in a question is important, and being unclear is not being smart. It's actually being a little bit annoying and kind of distracting your learners from the point. And also, it kind of, I went through a couple of phases regarding instructions and questions. First, I was annoyed that every multiple choice question with a single choice will have an instruction of pick one choice, or like select one option. And I started removing that, or asking my instructional designers to remove that prompt from interactions that they were building. But then I found out that a surprising number of people are kind of new to quizzes. It's not something that they do every day, unless they kind of go through them as part of their job daily. A lot of people will not be too familiar with the concept of, well, okay, maybe single choice question, kind of like back to school times, back to passing some sort of like a driving license exam online. Yeah, but things like multiple choice questions, where you can select multiple options. If you don't provide the instruction, tons of people will just pick one question, pick one answer choice, and stop at that. And we'll never get the question right because of that. And my visual designers, they will be very insistent on, hey, it's very easy to understand. Single choice has radio buttons and multiple choice has check marks, and everyone who's on the internet knows that. That's not true. They know that because they're my visual designers. Tons of people don't know that. So a good question will have a little bit of instruction, a prompt. And then the other side is the answer. Again, you need to be very clear about what you want. Do you want them to write something? Is this a single word? Is this a number that you want to fill in, and so on? Because again, if you're asking for a single word answer, some people will provide you a full sentence. What do you do with that, and so on. Attractive distractors. That's a kind of a pun that I tried to make. Distractors are the wrong choices in a question. So there's a right answer, or a few of those, and then there are wrong answers. The wrong answers that you can choose are called distractors, in case you didn't know, and they need to be attractive. They don't need to be an afterthought. Very often it's very easy to see which options are wrong by the way they are worded. They're shorter, they're not worded as carefully, and sometimes they are very hard to tell from the right answer because it's the right answer copied and then one letter, one number changed. Maybe one word is missing and out of a full sentence, which is again very annoying. Similar length, right? So the answers, sometimes you can see that the right answer is much longer than others, and it's also, I think it's not just similar length, it's also similar units of measurement and so on. You want to make a user's experience kind of easy for the user. You need to test them for what they would do with the information that they're given and the knowledge that they have received. How will they try to apply it? Not try to confuse them with a clever trick of like missing a comma or something. Yeah, and generally, the shorter options are better for everyone, always. Yeah, and clearly different, but I've already touched upon this. So if you just copy a question, an answer option, and just delete one word to confuse everyone, or replace some like yes with no, or replace like an article or something, and make this a wrong option because of that, that's just trickery. That does not change anything or check anything really. Right. So here's a question. Which has a problem, because there is also something I wanted to mention. Sometimes answers are randomized. Sometimes you are not the person who will make the choice to randomize answer options. Sometimes this choice will be made for you by people who build the course or who upload this to a learning management system, or maybe they'll do it years later. So unless you're absolutely certain that your questions will not be randomized, do not use phrases like all of the above or none of the above or A and B options are correct or anything like that, because you will end up with something like this, where all of the above is the correct answer because all of the 4 countries are Euro countries, or rather none of them are Euro countries, sorry. And option D is the correct one, but if you read this as an A, B, and C only, and Norway is out of all of the above, then it makes no sense to anyone who knows their facts about these countries. There's an excellent question in the chat. Are there benefits to randomizing answers? I think not. Really, unless this is not a knowledge check, but this is something like you give someone a bank of 100 questions to self-test, and you know that they will go through those 100 questions multiple times for 1,000 of attempts in total. Then maybe to avoid a little bit of mechanical memory, related to some questions, you want to allow them to randomize options, so like to make it a little bit less automatic, less mechanical. But other than that, no, not really. I think it's something from the times where learners would write out the correct answers, like the answer key, and will pass those to one to another and try to cheat in this way. But I don't think it's a thing anymore with the current level of technologies and so on. So no, like unless you have a good option, a good idea why you're doing this, I wouldn't be doing this. In fact, I don't think I've ever used this option in a real course that I've built. But I know it's there, and I've seen situations exactly like that in learning management systems. So, in short, no, I don't think so. If you disagree and if you're watching this later, let me know in the comments. This will be on YouTube, hopefully. And yeah, if you have a pro for randomizing, let us know. Here's another example of a terrible question. I'm not sure where it's from, but it's really like, if you see these terrible screenshots in this presentation, they've been taken from a real thing. So a couple of problems with this approach is that first of all, it's kind of worded wrong. Like, what will be 1 + 9 - 3? It's not how I would word this. But then the problem with another question that is it hinges on the question one, because it asks you to grab the answer from question one and do something with this. Again, a lot of in many cases, question order will be randomized. So if you are using this schema and the questions are randomized and question two comes before question one, well, you can't really do anything with it. And then also, if you're testing for something, well, in this case of like basic math, you're essentially spending two questions on same thing. And if you fail at question one, you automatically fail at question two. So what's the point? Your data will be wrong. If you try to analyze a large number of people doing this, let's say in a bank of 10 questions, essentially just people who made one mistake have made two automatically, and so on. So there's this, try to avoid this schema as well. Since we're essentially just stepped into the territory of mistakes when writing quiz questions, I decided to highlight a few of those. And the number one is measuring the wrong thing, right? So what we are typically not measuring in typical corporate e-learning is people's cognitive capacity, like something we ask them to listen to a fragment of a conversation between a patient and a doctor. And then we start asking questions about that conversation. If we are doing this, we need to let them replay that conversation as many times as they want, because we're not testing their ability to hear something once and remember this, and then do something based on that. So unless we're training people who only hear something once and need to remember this, for everyone else, give them a replay button. We're not testing cognitive capacity. We're not testing them, like we're not giving them 1 minute to read 4 pages of text and then testing their comprehension and so on. We're in the corporate world, it never happens, right? Level of literacy, again, think about the level of literacy of your audience. Sometimes we test blue collar workers. We do a lot of stuff for people who work in warehouses, in retail chains, and so on. And sometimes people who are not fluent in the language that the course is in. This is often very true here in Europe. It's also true in many jobs in the United States, when people are not native speakers of English, for example. So unless you're testing specifically for their ability to read, write, or speak proper English, try to avoid complex sentences, words, vocabulary, stuff like that. And you don't want to fail people on the wrong thing. vocabulary, right? So I mentioned this memory, we're more or less in the territory. Attention to detail. Again, I will have an example for that actually. So an eyesight, make like things need to be accessible. Sometimes I've seen subject matter experts emailing me images where you need to identify a mistake in a production line, in a production facility, or a form which has been scanned and faxed and then compressed as JPEG like a million times, so from presentation to presentation, and then it's just hard to read, and some people will miss that because it's hard to read, not because they don't know something. So again, we don't want to fail them on the wrong thing. Speaking of attention to detail, in the 3 sales forecasts for the next 4 years of companies A, B, and C, which company is expected to sell the most? What do you think? Yeah, I'll give you a second. They're on different scale, right? So the right one are like taller, but the first one will sell like 45 units, 55, 65, and 75, while others will do like 35, 45, 55, 65 at most, 25, 35, 45, and 55 at most. So C is the lowest sales, but then again, is it like percentage growth? Like, is it units? It's an unclear question with different scales, which sort of tricks you into stuff. And it's a real question. Again, it's a screenshot from somewhere from. Yes, Catalan, I got you right. So. That's an example of a terrible question. Let's not do stuff like that. And this one is from a show. The show called Top 1%. I know it's on in Australia. Maybe it's in the US as well. And the question is, which candle will burn down first, A, B, C, or D? Okay, so the right answer is B, because B is the only one that is on fire, and A, B, C, and D are not on fire. So they will not even burn at all, and B will burn down first for sure. That is a TV show that's all about tricking people like that, but that's the whole point of I think quizzes and corporate training, they should not be like that. So if you need to use an example, grab this. It's from a show called Top 1%. And I think it's a 20% question. So it's considered to be a hard question. Like most people should not be able to answer that. I know I made this mistake first time when I was watching this. All right. So next mistake is unsolvable questions. We're at half hour, so we're almost at the end. So top mistake number 2 is unsolvable questions. The questions that you can't really answer. They can be ambiguous. We've seen a couple of those just now. The answers can be subjective, right? So good, bad, things like what would you do, what would someone do, and so on. Incomplete information, again, we've seen an example of that. Overlapping alternatives, we'll talk about this in a sec. And questions that complicate simple things, right? Another quiz while I have you online with me. So I think the sign is self-explanatory. The question is, how fast can you go beyond the following traffic sign? A, is it 40 miles an hour? B, is it 60 miles an hour? C, is it 90 miles an hour? Or D, is it 120 miles an hour? And although this is not a screenshot, this is a real question, just a little bit paraphrased from a real test that I had to take. And I was so annoyed by these questions. So what do you think? A, B, C, or D? And again, I'm so grateful to everyone who's participating. This is really fun. None. 2 B's, 1 none. B. Okay, so the problem is that if you have a speed limit of 60 miles an hour, you can go beyond that both at 40 miles an hour, because you can't do that. You know, like, it's not against the rules to go 40 miles an hour in the speed limit of 60. You can't do that. And 60 is also true, although in some cases, some people will ask, like, is it Like if you do exactly 60, it is right or wrong. But yeah, it's A and B are both correct. But what the guys who asked me this question on an exam wanted to hear from me, and the correct answer, because it's a single choice question, was B, 60. Although A is obviously a correct answer, you can go 40 miles an hour in a 60 miles an hour zone, and I was so annoyed. I did figure out what they wanted from me, but I decided that I think it was the moment when I decided I needed to vent in a webinar to some people who will share my pain. Right, and C and D are obviously wrong. If you don't know that, please don't drive on the road. Right, so that's another example of overlapping options. So A and B are overlapping, and it's really hard to choose unless you kind of get into the mind of people who are asking you this. Right, top mistake number 3 actually is not specifying the rules of what you actually want to hear. So first of all, we've seen that multiple answers can be correct. If you don't tell people that multiple answers can be correct, they will be confused. What if there is no correct answer? Like Eddie Garcia here told us, like there is no correct answer. That can also be an answer. What if you need to click submit without choosing anything? That would be crazy. What if you need to write something in and the correct answer is not writing anything in because there is no correct? Like it can be crazy sometimes. And you need to tell people that, yeah, sometimes there will be no correct answers to a question. So and then instruct them. Should they skip it? Should they like put a dash in it or something? Again, losing points for wrong answers. Typically, we all assume that if you get something wrong, you get 0 points. If you get something right, you get a single point, something like that. But then it turns out, like sometimes, that you lose points for wrong answers, and then it's a different level of approach to guessing or thinking too hard about the stuff. Or if it's a multiple choice question, if you mark, like you only get points for the things that you've marked correctly, and you lose points for the things you've marked incorrectly. And what happens if you didn't mark anything? Do you get 0 points? Because it seems like a better strategy then. So you can confuse learners easily with losing points and not explaining how it works, or not even mentioning the fact that you can lose points in the test. So yeah, here is just an example which I think encompasses a lot of things that we've talked about today. So which of the following is a false statement? Well, first of all, asking like which statement is false is a trickery of sorts in itself. And then GDP, gross domestic product, can be used to measure economic growth or cannot be used to measure economic growth. Again, 2 identical options, and we've just changed can to cannot. And then it cannot be used to measure economic growth, which is true, but it's a negative. So should I mark it because it's a false state? Like you can easily get confused. Then there is an ambiguous option of it depends on the method of calculating the gross domestic product, which is like, of course it depends. Like if you calculate it wrongly, then is it a false statement? Is it a true statement? It's really weird. And then A and B are both true, which cannot happen because they are mutually exclusive, A and B. And then it means that D is actually a false statement. But then we don't know how many false statements are there. So it's a question. I'm I'm venting again. So terrible question. Don't do that. Instead, if you need to ask, if you gave someone a lecture on economics, on like basic economics, and then you're asking them about gross domestic product, just ask them like, what can you do? Like, can you measure in economic growth of a country? Yes, you can. Can it help compare different countries? Yes, it can. So both are correct. And by the way, you also reminded someone about an important thing that they need to remember. Excellent. That's a great simple question. Doesn't require too much thought from you to create, but also does not turn everything into a riddle as the previous one. And the bonus tip was, of course, that the longest option is always the correct one. On the basic level, try to avoid questions like this where option C is the correct one. But also, if you really want to trick someone, make a wrong option like really, really long, make the correct option short, and see who will fall for this because they're not thinking about your questions, but they're just guessing, and you want to punish them like this. But in almost every test that I've seen in my life, if you just don't think about, just choose the longest option, you will get something above 50% for sure. Right, so I guess this is it for today. Again, I'm CEO of BranchTrack.com. I did not talk about BranchTrack today at all, so do check it out. It's a cool platform to create scenario-based training. Right in your browser, there is a free tier, which is very, very usable. If you need a demo, let us know. There are like dozens of buttons to ask for a demo, and if not, come next Thursday. I'll be talking about scenario-based training, but not specifically BranchTrack. So if you use Storyline, for example, you will be able to use 100% of what I will be talking about. So yeah, with that, thank you so much for showing up. It's been a pleasure. If you're in the United States, have a great day. If you're in Europe, it's almost Friday. So yeah, thanks so much, and see you hopefully next week. Bye-bye.